Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Yay, we did it. Oh my gosh, that was drama. Okay, well, listen. Thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast.
Yeah, great. Super
So
excited to be
excited.
here.
Yeah. So I believe we're going to be talking about rebuilding a relationship after addiction, which, I was about to launch into a whole thing and I was like, we should probably just hit record. Um, but I have many clients who are in relationship with somebody who is not in addiction, doesn't really perceive themselves as being somebody that is in addiction, although I would argue that maybe codependency is a little adjacent to addiction. Um, and there are some common issues that continue to come up. Rebuilding trust is a big issue. What I hear from the people that I work with is like, how long is it going to take for them to trust me again? When are they going to stop bringing it up? It's like whenever they want to confront the other person about their part. This is all, they're like, no, 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 this is all about you. You're the one with the problem. So, I'm going to be asking, questions around how to resolve that, make peace around that. But first, maybe we can start with, Matthew, maybe you can share with us a little bit about your addiction story, a little bit about how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. I think now that I've done the work, I realize that my addiction journey started really early. And my struggles were predominantly with sexual addiction, addiction to pornography, and kind of sexually acting out behaviors. And and that really, it started innocently for me. Innocently, I say in terms of I don't think anybody knew what was going on. I was exposed to a lot of adult content when I was young. I grew up in the 80s. I remember when we were calling our cable company to get MTV, and
Oh my God.
and when we did, but then I remember watching MTV, 3, 4, 5 years old, and even then realizing that like something was different. And we watched a lot of movies, we watched a lot of TV shows as a family. My parents would cover my eyes during the inappropriate scenes, right? Or if there was nudity or sexualized content. And this kind of really being kind of raised in that culture of kind of hypersexualization, and you throw on top of that kind of early exposure when I was about 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old, to pornography. And this became a way that I would kind of get some of those dopamine hits and this escape and that kind of rush. And that just continued to progress throughout my life. And at some points it was kind of heavier use, at some points it was lighter use. Usually the healthier that I was, the more connections and relationships that I had, right? The less my usage would be, the more isolated I became. Kind of if I was in a new place or I didn't have as many friendships, my usage would go up. And that just started compounding over time. And what I found myself doing was hiding more and more behaviors, being more and more secretive about what I was doing, finding myself really kind of in this hating what I was doing, but also not feeling like I could stop it, justifying it. I was, it's not really a big deal. Everybody does it. And all these things were kind of just building and building and building. And Joanna comes into my life. And I kind of throw some breadcrumbs her way about this kind of past struggle, right? Obviously not being honest about the reality of what it was and about really what was going on even with me at the time. And I kind of throw her these breadcrumbs, and with this idea that, our marriage is going to be one of the solutions to this, right? That as we get married, as we have our sexual relationship, the things that I'm doing are going to go away. And then realizing that's not the case, right? We're into our marriage, and as life starts to happen, the addiction starts to show back up. I start re-engaging. I start hiding more and more because now, right, she's in the same house with me, right? So she's asking questions about where I spend my time and what's going on and why things are so kind of chaotic between us. And even though we had a really good relationship, like there was a lot really, really good between us. What I started to see was that my addiction was really kind of ripping the relationship apart. It was really keeping us from what we wanted. And about 3.5 years into our relationship is where things really hit ahead. And it hit ahead because someone actually came and gave a talk to a class Joanna was in. I'll let you kind of tell that story.
Yeah, so someone came and basically shared their story of addiction and then journeying through recovery, finding sobriety, repairing the relationship. And as he was talking, I could just sense inside my gut, like, oh, I think this is the thing, because I had no idea what was going on. None of his behaviors did he share openly with me. None of them were out in the open. Everything was completely hidden. And even when I would ask about it, it would be lied about, denied, right? And so, but I knew something was there. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So when I heard this story and this man share, so much of it resonated with me that I was like, oh, I think this is it. I think this is the thing. And so I went home that day after class and I asked him finally straight up. I was like, is this the thing that you are struggling with?
And for the first time in my life, I was honest and said yes. And it kind of slipped out. And I think part of it was hearing a story of hope, because I think I had just really resigned myself to, like, this is just going to be who I am forever. This is always going to be in my life forever. It's not anything I can stop. And and that if anyone ever finds out, if anyone ever figures it out, then everything will be done, right? All life will end, like there will just be nothing good. And so hearing someone's life of like victory and freedom and actually feeling kind of, what sobriety looks like. And I didn't even know I was an addict when I'm hearing this. I just knew that I had something that I hated that I couldn't stop. And so hearing that someone found that gave me, I think, just that tiny little bit of courage to say, yes, this is what I'm dealing with. And then really practically, Joanna handed me that list of resources that this guy had walked through and said, here's probably what you need to do. And that's kind of what happened. I went full force into recovery. I was on a plane not too long after that for a weekend intensive to really get to kind of some of the underlying issues. I was in a 12-step group not shortly after that. I was getting counseling. I was realizing and becoming completely aware, no, I actually have a major life problem, right? I'm an addict. I can see where it shows up in my life. And I kind of committed fully to that. Joanna was left to kind of pick up a lot of the emotional pieces of that, right? That realization, that discovery completely wrecked her understanding of who we were, who she was, who I was. And so I'm doing all this recovery work. She's kind of left with all of the pieces of the damage of my action. I'm feeling probably better than I have in years, maybe decades of my life, and she's all of a sudden feeling worse. And we started to realize really quickly that putting the pieces of our relationship together, regardless of how sober I was going to be a challenge. It was going to be really hard. And it was really tricky and tough. And we kind of fumbled all over ourselves. We made a lot of mistakes. We weren't really sure what to do. There weren't a lot of great resources around kind of what a journey of restoration for a couple looks like. And it was part of that stumbling that really forced us, as we found kind of some progress and we found some healing, to really kind of say, hey, there needs to be a simpler, easier, more direct way that a couple who's experienced the rupture and the kind of breaking of trust because of addiction or any kind of significant betrayal of trust, how do they put those pieces back together?
Yeah, that is the secret sauce right there. There's a lot to unpack there. I kind of want to take a step back to you talked about being exposed to pornography at 10 or 11 years old. How were you exposed to that?
I was actually at a Christian church camp.
Of course.
The places that you don't think you're going to get exposed. It was one of the guys brought a Playboy magazine. Like I said, this is in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And so there's no digital access at this point. Someone had pornography, Playboy magazine, and they were kind of passing it around, right? And everybody was looking. And I had seen sexualized content before, and so I was aware of sex. And at that point, one of the things that was often part of the conversation as I was getting into kind of late elementary, early middle school was like, who are you? You know, are you in a relationship with them? Are you going to get to first base, right? All these sexualized
Yeah.
questions. And then pornography was just this kind of a, this fuel on this fire. It was almost like, jet fuel. And so then all of a sudden, I was dealing with things that my brain was not ready to understand, right? Not ready
Yeah.
to conceptualize, but also highly energized and excited by, right? There was something going on in my body and my brain going, wow, this feels really, really, really good, but something I
Mhm.
really don't understand.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you were getting messages from your parents that this was shameful or bad, the covering your eyes, the like, like, not this. So there's something, I feel like when, our parents have those when we get the messages, this is something we shouldn't do, it almost creates this compulsion. Like, that is the
Yeah,
thing. That's the thing I want
yeah.
to do.
Mhm.
Like, oh, there's something good here, and you're trying to keep
Yeah.
it from me, and I'm gonna be sneak.
Uh-huh.
I remember my kids telling me one time it's like controlling parents make sneaky kids. I was like, that is the damn truth.
Yeah.
But so we're getting messages from the parents that like this is a no-no, and then getting exposure to pornography. I mean, that's at that age where your brain is starting to light up. And
Yeah.
by the time you're 14, that's when we start having like this consciousness appear there. Our identity starts to emerge. And so getting those messages early without context, were you able to have it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't help but wonder like messages from your parents of like, oh, this is bad. Were there no open conversations about sexuality and yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting because there wasn't overt kind of shame around it or kind of discussions about like sex is bad, but there very much was no conversations around it, right? None
right.
of the
Yeah.
conversations were happening. And so it was more of I really didn't know where to process it, right? The only conversations
Right.
happening were around my peers. And you can imagine a bunch of middle school boys having conversations about healthy sexuality. That's not going to happen. And so I'm taking all that in and I'm realizing, part of what I started to realize is that relationships brought status. And so that was one of the things I recognized was that depending on who I was in a relationship with would determine the kind of status I had in the community. And so there was this kind of pornography side and this kind of relational kind of more kind of just engaging with female side. And both of these were kind of these levers that I was pulling to kind of medicate how I was feeling. We moved around a
Yeah.
lot around that time. We
Mhm.
started moving every couple of years. And so I found myself often as the new kid. And
Ooh,
the way I
brutal.
realized that I could kind of create stability would be to get into a relationship, right? So I would usually have a girlfriend before I had a friend.
Right.
Because that brought that stability. And so I can see now where my brain was like, okay, this kind of comfort that I found in pornography and kind of, this sexual engagement, but also this kind of status or security that I would find in kind of pursuing relationships with women. And so these were these levers that I would pull to kind of make everything okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a part of self-soothing, belonging, connection. And if we can't find those things in healthy ways, moving around is really tough on kids. It's
Yeah.
very disorienting to your identity because typically every school has like their set of rules around what's appropriate to wear and who to talk to. And every school has like their rules. And so adopting to new rules, I would imagine was really must have shaken your identity. And what was from what I know about you, I believe that y'all have a religious foundation. Did you grow up in the church as well? Because you were going to a Christian camp at 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I was growing up in the church and it was a little bit like my family experience. No conversations around sex, right?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
really discussions. There was kind of an agreed upon understanding that like sex was reserved for marriage. Like that was a
Right.
fairly clear delineation, but
Yeah.
that was really it. And that wasn't even rarely mentioned. And even when there was discussions of kind of sexuality, it was very, very limited
Yeah.
it really wasn't, and it didn't address some of those kind of deeper questions. And so I think I look at my early life and I recognize like exposure, lack of resources, going through an emotionally chaotic time. It makes total sense that what I learned to do was escape, right? I learned to escape the
Mhm.
chaos of my reality and to find this kind of comfort in this thing. I
Yeah.
think what I didn't know then and what I didn't realize was that that comfort was killing me, right? It was silently kind of bringing this death into my life, and because it was creating shame, it was creating
Yeah.
isolation,
Guilt.
it was creating guilt, and it was warping my sense of what relationships should be. Like I
For
recognized that
sure.
all of a sudden women for me were becoming a tool, a resource, right? That was how I got my
Mhm.
sense of self-worth, was by objectifying using women. And so I
Yeah.
didn't know it at the time, but that's what I see now. And so that was warping my relationship with women, right? I didn't know how to have
Yeah.
a partnered, right, open, transparent relationship, because that's not what my relationship with women was about. It was about
Yeah.
how can I use you to feel a certain way,
Right.
right? And so as Joanna and I are trying to build this partnership, right, I realize I've got two forces working. I've got a desire for connection and kind of this secure attachment, but I've also got this habit of using relationships with people for my own benefit, right? And not actually being transparent, right? Not actually being all in, right? I could pretend like I was all in, but I would never really be all in a relationship.
Yeah, yeah. That I mean, those are really big topics for a young person to deal with. I actually grew up in the church as well, and it seemed like I used to hang out with the pastor's daughter, and she was she and I smoked a lot of weed together. I just feel like there are so many beautiful things about religion, but there's also some very, obvious, constant striving for perfectionism, not being able to talk about, the underbelly of like, human desire and sexuality and like what's normal and appropriate. This suppression often causes a backlash, and the patriarchy of the Christian religion can be problematic in some ways,
Yeah.
and so the whole dowry thing, marriage being a contract for a man's right for sexual reproduction of a woman. I mean, it goes kind of deep, but that aside, I could understand how the environment that you're describing could foster. And listen, it's not just excluded to pornography. There is a lot of addiction, right? I mean, listen, we're just human, right? So it shows up in a variety of ways, but it all results in this sort of fundamental, like, I don't feel okay, and I'm looking to self-soothe. We don't know how to process stressful feelings to resolution. And I appreciate, reliance on a higher power. I do as well. But there needs to be something more. And I appreciate your openness and your honesty. And so, now once you recognize and and pornography, like alcohol and drug addiction, are also progressive, right? And in the progression is increased levels of guilt and shame until we just feel so out of alignment with our values that, I mean, it just creates so much emotional turmoil. So, when you're confronted in your relationship, like there's problems in the relationship, Joanna, how did you experience this as a problem? You mentioned disconnection, like there's a secret, like there is something, we can feel it, right? There is
Yeah.
something going on, and I just cannot put my finger on it. It must have been so like disorienting and confusing. What was that experience like for you?
Exactly. Very disorienting, very confusing because we would have these really great conversations where we would talk about our values, we would talk about our
Yeah,
goals, our dreams for our relationship, and that was all aligned and that felt
yeah,
great, right? We wanted the same thing. We wanted to be extremely close and connected and intimate, and we wanted to work together. Like we had all these dreams and these plans. And then when it actually came to the practical moving in towards each other, that's where everything would go wrong. And we would have some of those moments, but very often we would have chaos instead. And so
What does
yeah,
chaos look like to you?
very up and down emotionally, right? And so one day or one moment we could be really close and feeling close and connected. And then the next day, Matthew would be shut down, he would be withdrawn, and then the next day he would get really angry really easily. He struggled with a lot of rage early on in our relationship. And I would never be able to put a finger on why, right? Like usually if someone's really anxious or angry, you can kind of point to like, oh, this thing happened and it triggered them emotionally, not right. What I didn't know is the thing that was happening was his secret addiction, his acting out, and then the cascade of shame and powerlessness and anger and shutdown and withdrawal that
Yeah.
after that I would see that part, but I wouldn't see the acting out. And so I had no idea what was creating this very chaotic experience emotionally in our relationship.
Yeah, and I could see how like you must be thinking, well, he's home. He's not out
Yeah,
drinking at night or going out with the boys, or he's like not physically. I would imagine like because when, with alcoholism, addiction, people are physically absent.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100% it is. And so it's a little bit different than some of those other addictions where it's like, it's in your face, you can see it, right? You kind of
Right.
need to
No
more
denying
like,
it.
yes, it's very different because you just have no idea. And some men, lots of men are very good at covering their tracks, very good
For
at
sure.
hiding,
Yeah.
right? And so we spent a lot of time together, right? There wasn't even much time when we weren't even together. And so
Yeah.
it really was this huge question mark of like, what
Mhm.
is going on?
What is going on?
Yes.
So I'm just curious. So, and forgive me if this is too personal, you can choose not to answer, but did you guys save yourself for marriage?
Well, he was married before we got married.
I don't even
Well,
want
no,
to.
but okay,
Yeah.
but you had a relationship before, but so you guys meet. Did you like
Right.
refrain from sexual activity until you were married? Are you that religious of that kind? Do you know what I'm saying?
So I had never kissed anyone before Matthew. That's a fun piece of our
Get
story.
out, girl. We need to have
We
another
had very
conversation with
different,
you.
yeah. I mean, I think part of the reality was we had very different sexual backgrounds. And that was part of the reason
Yeah.
that I kind of convinced myself to not tell her the whole story because I had this idea that if she knows my sexual history,
She's
Mhm.
gonna be
right?
freaked out.
I know her sexual history because
Yeah.
there wasn't
There
one.
wasn't one.
So when she's like, "Have you been with someone before?" It was like, "Yes," right? I'm not going to let you know how many
Yeah.
people. I'm not going to let you
Yeah.
know the ways in which that
Mhm.
occurred because I believe that if you know that information, you'll
Yeah.
run from me. And
And we didn't have a lot of just relational tools in general, right? And so we knew we wanted a good relationship, but we didn't know how to build it. And so for me coming in, right, I didn't understand the level of honesty and transparency that is okay or that is necessary for the type of
Oh,
intimacy we wanted, right? And
okay.
so I obviously knew he had a sexual past because he had been married before, right? So I was
Right,
like,
right, right.
clearly there's something there, but
But
do
you
I need
didn't
to
know
know
what
it?
was,
Do
you
I do
didn't
I
know.
need to
Yeah.
ask more questions? Do I need to know the details? Or is it that's in the past, we're creating our new future together,
Yeah.
right? And so not knowing those types of things got us into a relationship where there wasn't honesty, there wasn't transparency from
Okay.
the beginning, and then that just continued.
even in
I
our
could, yeah.
relationship, like we had some really healthy sexual experiences. Like there was a lot of health to our sexual relationship. A lot
Prior to being
really
married?
good. No, I just in the marriage, like as
Oh,
we were
after you got
in our
married.
marriage, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of health to it. So it could look really good, but then I would shut
Well,
down.
it's new,
So
right?
Joanna would come and engage, right, early on in our
Uh,
relationship, and I'd kind of be like, I'm tired or I don't feel good. And
oh,
then she would be like, she'd get
confused.
upset, right? Or she'd get hurt and she'd be
Yeah.
like, hey, I don't get it. Like
She felt rejected. Did you feel
one minute
rejected?
you're all over
Oh,
me, and the
yeah.
next minute you don't want to like touch me for a week. And
Mhm.
that would be that
Yeah.
shame response. And so that was
Oh,
really part of our general relationship where we'd have these really wonderful connection
Mhm.
points. I would drop this chaos on our relationship. she would have no answers for it. And then I would usually sometimes double down and I would either blame her or I would blame life. Work is really stressful right now, or there's just a lot going on, right? I was in complete denial because I was just assuming like this is just life, this is just who I am,
Oh.
not telling her what was really going on.
When you were in denial, those feelings of like I'm tired from work, or like I'm just, I'm sure that must have felt true for you at the time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, you have like this knowing of like that's not really true. Like if you're acting out and
Yeah.
then later you're just like, girl, I'm just tired. And that must have been so confusing for you, Joanna, like not knowing what's normal in a relationship had you not, because you hadn't had it. But I'm sure
Yeah.
at the same
Mhm.
time, Matthew's like so probably so conflicted. Denial is a funny thing because the one that we're lying to is ourselves,
Oh
really.
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we don't
Yeah.
even know what we lie to ourselves so much we don't even know what the truth is anymore. But I would imagine from, Joanna, your perspective, especially not
Mhm.
having a lot of experience, not even knowing what's
Mhm.
normal or what's right,
Yeah.
and blaming
Yes.
yourself and
Yeah, and absolutely. And we had a very part of our story we didn't share is we had a very fast relationship as well. We from the time we had our first date to we got engaged, it was 2 months. From the time
how
we
old
got,
were you at the time, if I may ask?
I was 24. Well, 23 to 24. My birthday happened in between,
That's what we got.
Okay, okay.
and he was 30. And then 2 months after we got engaged, we got married. And so it was a
Okay.
very fast early
So
relationship.
you really grew up religious. So you were really saving yourself for marriage and you did not have so this was all brand new.
Yes, well, and it was there was definitely the religious part. There's also I had very high standards, I think, in terms of like um who I was going to give time to. And so I'm a
Okay.
fairly strong sort of person. I traveled a lot
And
before I
you're
got.
well educated, so you were like going to school and you're
Yes,
Yeah.
ambitious, so you're busy.
I was headed to
She's
law school, and the first
Okay.
week, weekend orientation of law school, they said, "Are you in a relationship?" It was really funny. Because they were like the older students were like walking you around, and I was like, "Well, I just started one like 2 weeks ago." So that was the other part. The 2 months we were dating, it was long distance. I was at law school.
Oh my goodness.
and,
Okay, so that kind of explains why there wasn't like a
yeah.
lot of time to be messing
Yeah.
around because you were
Yes.
busy.
Yeah. It was
You're
very
very
quick.
goal
It
oriented.
was very, yeah. And so they basically were like, well, that relationship will not last. They basically were like, don't plan on having a relationship in law school. It's that
Okay.
intense.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of like my focus was on me, my life, where I was headed. And this was a very unplanned relationship in terms of like,
Yeah.
okay, this was very,
But they said no relationship, so you're like challenge
I'm
accepted.
like, okay, fine. Guess I'm done with law school.
yeah. Lost will lost.
Yeah.
Challenge
And so it
accepted.
was very, I think neither one of us was looking for a relationship at the
Yeah.
time. It just kind of happened in our gut. We knew
That's
like
how it
this
is.
feels right. And not just the relationship, but something about this relationship is really changing the direction of our lives. So I ended up dropping out of law school. We moved across the
Yeah.
country to go to grad school at seminary together. And so
Oh wow.
there was a lot in there. And so that was another reason it was so scary and so chaotic was I had given up my
Everything.
whole plan, my whole direction in life and tied it to our relationship.
Hmm.
And then when that relationship was coming crashing down around me, that was double scary.
Matthew was being scandalous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just playing.
and I
Mhm.
think what was hard is, I mean, we've dealt with this, the pain of this reality is, the thing I took away from Joanna is I took away an ability for her to choose, because I didn't give
Mm,
her all the information. And
yeah.
and so and I tied her, right. I co-opted her into a vision that wasn't something that was based in full reality. There was truth to it. There's absolute truth to it. It's why we're still together, why we work together, and
Mhm.
we do what we do together. We have a great relationship. We love who we are together. but I didn't give her the chance to make that full
Mhm.
informed decision.
Yeah.
And I think that was what was part of the pain that was so
Mhm.
great
Yeah.
was not that she would have chosen something different, but that she never got the choice at all. And
Mhm.
when we work with
Yeah.
couples, that's a lot of times what partners feel is
Yeah.
that my choices were taken away. And I think
Mhm.
when you're
Yeah.
in the relationship with an addict, that is part of one of the hard realities is
Mhm.
so many of your choices get taken away, either because you don't have access to all the information.
Mhm.
Even if the addiction is out there, there's still
Yeah.
usually parts of it that's hidden, right? There's parts that are kind of kept secret,
Yeah.
so that it's less known or kind of minimized.
Mhm.
Or if it's a secret addiction, like a sexual addiction,
Mhm.
then so much is unknown. And it's that loss of a sense of power and
Mhm.
choice and how to
Yeah.
put those pieces back, which can be really, really difficult,
Yeah.
right? And so I recognize that when I told her the truth, just even in that moment, I was giving some of her power back. I
Mhm.
didn't realize it, but I could see it now. I was giving her the chance to choose,
Mhm.
and kind of go, do you really want to choose this
Mhm.
relationship?
Yeah.
Amazingly, she chose yes. I still don't quite right understand like how she
Aw.
kind of got there and said,
Mhm.
hey, this is worth leaning into.
Mhm.
But I think that's the tough reality for couples that are going
Yeah.
through this is navigating some of those waters because like I said, as an addict and someone who's lived in secrecy, my whole reality has been about kind of controlling the narrative.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm going to make you believe what I
Yeah.
want you to believe about me. I'm not going to let you decide.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, and realizing like I can't live that way anymore if we want to have a
Mhm.
future was a really challenge for us of like, how do I become a person that goes
Mhm.
from all of this secrecy, all of these lies, all of these ways that I hid to someone who's
Mhm.
now kind of transparent and out there and
Yeah.
letting information kind of be decided upon
Mhm.
and recognizing that's still been a really lifelong journey for
Mhm.
us.
Yeah. And so it's my understanding that you participated in 12 steps and you went to therapy. So there's like the SA, SLAA. There's a variety of 12-step programs that are
Mhm.
focused around sexual dysfunction. And so you're going through your process. And I understand there's not a lot of programs for the spouse. Like in AA, there's Al-Anon,
Right.
right? And I don't know that Al-Anon is a great fit for you. You tell me.
Yeah.
How did what was your path to healing as
Yeah.
Matthew's taking responsibility and,
Mhm.
and I gotta say, I appreciate the amount of courage it took to finally, come to that place in your addiction where you're just like, I can't do this anymore. And thank God you went to that class. By the way, the class that you went to, was it, and it sounded like it was a guy who was telling his story. Was his story around sexual dysfunction as well?
It was, yes. The class was
Okay.
called Shame and Guilt. 2-week intensive. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
so it fit. And yeah, and he had had a many decades long sexual addiction that
Oh,
he had
yeah.
hidden from his spouse. And so it was his story of getting found out, road to recovery, their journey of restoration, and kind of what that looked like.
And so you're like, this is setting off all the
Oh,
bells for you. You're like, oh my
yes.
gosh, this is what's happening. And so he goes and gets help. What was help like for you?
Yes, so help for me was a lot harder to find, especially
Yeah.
at the time. This is over a decade ago. There was
Hmm.
very little information on what the experience of the partner is on the other side of that betrayal. And so they
Yeah.
had, right, there's like these CODA and COSA meetings that were more like that codependent focus.
Oh,
And I would
codependency. Yeah.
go and I would just like, no, like this doesn't fit me at all. Like this isn't even
Okay. Didn't fit.
remotely what fits for me. And so I finally heard about a thing called betrayal trauma. And so Dr. Barbara Steffens had done some research
Oh,
on
yeah.
partners of sex addicts who experienced that betrayal in their relationship. And the research basically showed that the response behaviors, it wasn't co-addiction or codependence, it was actually PTSD symptoms.
Yeah.
So they were tracking that these were traumatized individuals, not codependent individuals. And part of the difference is because of the level of hiding and deception that is often present in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? Where that person can't make they're not able to make empowered choices because they don't have the information, and there's no way sometimes even to get the information. And so these women, even before kind of first discovery, like they would have all sorts of health issues going on.
Oh
Like
yeah.
their body would be telling them something's not right, their brain, right? And so when they finally find out, right, it creates this trauma. And so there was a
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Just to clarify, you mentioned that finding out creates the trauma. Is it like after you find out, that's when you suddenly realize that betrayal happened and
mhm.
that creates the trauma? Or is it a combination of like going through the roller coaster of like that was, I would imagine that was traumatic
It's
in
yes,
another
it's
way.
kind of both. Sometimes people will say like
Okay.
little T trauma and big T trauma, right? And
I mean,
so
it sounds challenge like
yes,
emotionally challenging to like
exactly,
if he's going on
exactly.
a if you're feeling rejected, if you're feeling confused,
Right,
like that could be
absolutely.
okay.
And so often women are, oftentimes they might be sensing something, kind of how I described, and
Yeah.
but they can't put their finger on it. And so they start to feel crazy. So they just shove that sense in their gut down and they stop trusting themselves.
Trusting self.
Stop trusting. And that is extremely traumatic, right? That not
Yeah.
trusting myself anymore. That's really, really damaging. So
That's
often
brutal.
that starts before that first discovery. Then when that discovery happens, that is absolutely a big T trauma because my entire reality, what I understand who I am, who my spouse is, what our relationship is,
Oh,
that
yeah.
my stability in this family, the world for some women, the community, right? Like
Yeah.
all of that is shattered in an instant, in a matter of
So it's
seconds
like
or moments.
post discovery trauma. There's like
Yes.
pre-discovery trauma, then
Absolutely.
post-discovery trauma.
Absolutely. And then for some women as well, or well, for all women, there's a period of time before you have the full picture. So all you know at first is that the picture I have, that ain't real. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's gone, but I don't even have something to replace it with yet. I don't
Okay.
have all the information. I don't have all the details. And so for
Right.
clients we work with, one of the first steps we do is a professionally guided full disclosure where
Uh,
that betraying spouse shares the full story. And so
whoa.
for partners, there's another piece of trauma is how long do I have to wait for my reality to be reinstated? And so
Okay.
if that takes a month, 3 months, 6 months, the longer it goes, the more trauma is inflicted.
Is there, like when you work with couples, is there sort of like a pact going into this, like, don't abandon me, give it a, I'm gonna tell you all the things, but
Uh,
please don't leave until we have a chance to kind of work it out. Like, is there like a pact going into this? Like Matthew's gonna be like, okay, I will tell you, but don't leave until we have a chance to work it out for. Is that a thing?
I mean, there is and there isn't. I mean,
Mhm.
part of
Maybe
the
there should be.
yeah, I mean, we well, like when we work with a couple, we want to make sure, like, hey, you guys
Yes,
want to
the
work this
goal
out,
is,
There
right?
has
right?
to be some safety and
Yeah,
commitment.
but there is an importance of there needs to be choice, right?
Mhm.
Joanna got to know about a month, maybe six weeks to 8 weeks after discovery. I sat down and we did our therapeutic full disclosure, and I went through my
Oh my
entire
God.
sexual history from early on
Mhm.
through discovery day,
Mhm.
which was my sobriety day,
Yeah.
With
which
support, was there a professional there?
we had professional
Mhm.
support, right? It was
So
early days. But she got to ask
we
questions,
basically
right?
called the therapist we had worked with and said, "Hey, can we schedule a session?" And we showed up with like our folder. She had no
Yeah.
idea what was
Oh
coming.
my
You
God, you
know?
guys showed up with an agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is genius.
And it was terrifying, right? Because as I'm reading all
Oh, I
of these
bet.
things, I'm thinking, is this going to be the piece of information that she says, no, that's a bridge too far, right? That's too much for me. I
Yeah.
can't do that. She got to ask questions, right? But what was so good about it though was is I no longer had to live in fear that if this piece of information comes out, it will change something.
Yeah.
Got
I
it.
knew that Joanna could get that information and go, no, sorry, that's too much for me. What's amazing, we do this a lot. There are so few cases where that actually happens, and that's usually when there's criminal behavior or there's some type of like direct safety problems.
Yeah.
It has been amazing. People who have been betrayed, in large part, right, women, that's the kind of majority of our clientele, how resilient, how faithful, how loyal they will be. Even though there's not been loyalty on the other side, right? They will remain loyal. And then the gift is that I finally got to feel like, you know, chosen, kind of like, because before I had Joanna was in my life, but she was in my life under the understanding that, well, you've accepted this version of me that I've shown you, but I knew all along I'm not that version. I
Yeah.
have a
You didn't show
history.
her the real
Yeah.
you.
Now I know she's accepted that version, right? She knows about my childhood. She knows about my middle school and high school and college years. She knows about the divorce, right? She knows about everything in my life. And because of that, I get to kind of wake up every day without that fear of what if she finds this? What if she finds that?
Right.
She gets to wake up with less of that fear, right? Obviously, it's still there for her because of my ability to lie, right? I have to maintain this kind of practice of honesty and transparency, but she gets to that. And so it's a hard journey, but it's such an important journey because it restores that power back, that choice back to the partner. But it also, for the addict, it restores that sense of I'll get to finally know if someone says yes to me, right? If someone,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that's really where a lot of the healing process can start. There's way more kind of after that in terms of restoring trust and being trustworthy. But without that, we see couples, right? They won't go anywhere because she's going to be constantly asking, what is it that I don't know? What else is out there? What shoe is going to drop? Because a lot of people get what we call drip disclosures, right? They'll find something on the computer, and then they'll find something on the phone, and then they'll see an email, right? And then there's this confession. And so they're kind of, they live in this constant state of what's the next shoe to drop.
Constant anxiety.
Right. And the addict is living in that constant state of what's the next thing she's going to find out, right? What's the next bit of information? And so this is really about removing that barrier so they can move forward.
Yeah, gosh, I have so many questions because I know that in addictive behavior, it's typically it's done in starts and fits. Like I quit probably a bazillion times, right? So sometimes like during the transition of quitting, there's some stops and starts and so that all could be it's like how much grace does the partner have to offer during that period of quitting?
Yeah.
And then afterward, like, yeah, I could just see how it's messy. Like recovery is messy.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there is a difference between like digital betrayal and like an actual affair, like a third party being involved. Like, do you, I don't know if this is the short answer of the week. I want to be, I know you guys have to go in like 7 minutes, but like, is there a way to differentiate? Is there a difference between digital and like actual, do you know what I'm saying? Like having an affair and
Yeah, there's obviously differences to it, but we see that the pain and the rupture isn't any different
it's the same.
because
Yeah.
it's the same, because it's a denial of the fidelity that we committed to, right? Because
Okay.
betrayal is so painful because it breaks the vow. I told Joanna that she was going to be my one and only. She was going to be
Source of
who I,
healing.
right? She's going to be who I thought about, right? Sexually, who I engaged with sexually, right? That was the commitment that I made to her, and I broke that commitment, right? And it was the breaking of that commitment. And so whether that is digitally, physically, emotionally, even, right? We see a lot of people who have emotional affairs,
Emotional affairs.
and they'll say, well, I never touched them, and right, it wasn't sexual, but it's still that betrayal is the same.
Betrayal.
What we've seen though is we have seen cases with rampant, right, betrayal behaviors, both physical, right, digital, financial. It's interesting. The level of betrayal has never been the obstacle for people to overcome. Usually the one obstacle is how hard is the betraying spouse willing to work to repair trustworthiness.
There it is. Yeah.
Um, and as much as we kind of see some cases sometimes and think, oh, there is no way they will make it. Like as I know this story, there's no way. That's never been the case for our clients. It's always kind of rested in as someone in recovery. Well, I commit wholeheartedly to recovery first for myself, and that's the key. I have to do it
Yeah.
for me. but will then I take that same level of energy into restoring the trust? Will I be honest? Will I become a safe person, right? Will I be responsible for myself in such a way that tells my wife when things get really hard, will I show up? Because that's the key, right? When life was hard, I ran early in our marriage. I ran to my addiction. Now, Joanna knows that when life is hard, right, I run to the resources and to the tools that I have, right, that gets me back, right, kind of into my best frame of mind. And that's really the key. And it's pretty amazing what couples are able to overcome and how happy they're able to be on the backside.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. We were just sharing, you guys were just sharing before we hit record, which was a fiasco. Um, sorry about that. Zoom doesn't always cooperate. But you were just sharing about how you're going to spend the summer together as a family in Germany with your 3 kids. It's like, wow, y'all have come such a long way in the last decade. That in giving and listen, working with other couples, I feel like I've heard somewhere before that people give up on their relationship because they've reached the end of their tools, but that
Mm.
doesn't mean that more tools don't exist.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just so appreciate that you two represent extended tools,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because people give up because they've reached the limit to their
Yes.
tools. But let's give some people hope to say, hey, you know what? There are more tools. If the
Absolutely.
counselor you're going to isn't working for you, try another one. And of course, I'll leave links to all your resources so that people can get connected with you and access your extended resources too. Just because it's like it just keeps coming up in the coaching that I do, and the addict wants to know, when is she going to forgive me? When is she going to stop? When is she going to stop holding this again? When is she going to do her work? And so I so appreciate that you two are available to help both sides do their work. Because to be fair, to the addict, the person on the other side of recovery has a lot of work to, trauma
Yeah.
therapy is difficult but necessary work for a relationship. They say that statement that if a reaction is hysterical, it's historical. So if we're overreacting in the moment to our partners, there's probably some unhealed trauma from the past that still needs to be addressed. So, Joanna, you doing your own trauma therapy is critical, critical. Because
Absolutely.
how long can the addict be in a relationship with someone who continues to beat them down? It's like that's not sustainable either, right? So I could see how it's necessary for both of you to do your work, and what you're
Absolutely.
doing is so important. So I'll leave links to all the things in the show notes. But if you want to just shout out like a website, where can people, maybe on social media or something, where can people get a hold of you?
Yes, our website is rabsmithteam.com. That's our last name. We're the only Rabsmiths in the world, so pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Just search sexual dysfunction.
Nice and easy. And then we also love to share a resource with people. You mentioned tools. We love tools. And so obviously our book, Building True Intimacy, talks about that intimacy pyramid, which is the main tool we use with our couples. But we also love to give a free check-in to people to just,
Okay.
especially in terms of like just rebuilding connection and trust as a couple. It is the little choices you make on a daily basis that are going to matter most. And so we created a daily check-in for couples to use to start right now, today, rebuilding that connection, rebuilding that trust, caring for the relationship. And so that's rabsmiththeam.com/free. They can grab that.
/free. I have several people in mind for this.
Perfect. Awesome.
Well, listen, it was such a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And man, God bless you on your journey. It's so
Yeah.
important.
Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much for
Really
having
appreciate it.
us.
Thanks.